आज का पॉडकास्ट और इस पॉडकास्ट का टॉपिक बहुत ही ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट होने वाला है क्योंकि इससे हमें एक टोटली फ्रेश पर्सपेक्टिव मिलने वाला है हमारे फेवरेट स्पोर्ट के ऊपर। आज के जो हमारे गेस्ट और किस फील्ड से आते हैं एक बार तुम पहले बता दो भाई।
Today we have Mr. David Gladson with us, who is a data analyst and has worked with multiple IPL teams.
तो आज ना हम लोग को चाहे वो आईपीएल ऑक्शन स्ट्रैटेजीज की बात करें जो कि अभी सबके सर पे चढ़ी हुई हैं, आईपीएल की टीम्स कैसे स्काउटिंग करती हैं प्लेयर्स के बारे में, कई सारी और कंट्रोवर्शियल चीज़ें जैसे कि डीआरएस, उसमें क्या कमियां हैं, क्या सही चीज़ें, डीएलएस मेथड, उसका कोई रिप्लेसमेंट है कि नहीं है, फैंटेसी एप्स, क्या आपको फैंटेसी एप्स यूज़ करने चाहिए कि नहीं, एंड शायद जो लास्ट सेगमेंट होने वाला है वो सबसे क्रिएटिव होने वाला है जो हम डिस्कस करेंगे कि एआई कैसे क्रिकेट के स्पोर्ट को टेक ओवर करने वाला है। आज बहुत सारे फ्रेश सेगमेंट्स और फ्रेश टॉपिक्स निकल के आएंगे इस पॉडकास्ट से, तो आई थिंक काफ़ी कुछ सीखने को मिलने वाला है। बट बिफोर स्टार्टिंग, लाइक ऑलवेज, क्या करना होता है ऑडियंस को?
इस वीडियो को लाइक करना, अपने दोस्तों में शेयर करना, इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना। हमने मेंबरशिप्स लॉन्च करी हैं, उसको जाके आप चेकआउट करिए। और हमारा जो फ्री टेलीग्राम ग्रुप चैट है उसको हम लोग कमेंट से पिन कर देंगे, वहाँ जाके दोस्त बनाइए और उनसे बातें करिए।
तो भाई विदाउट एनी फर्दर डू, सिट बैक, एंजॉय दिस अमेजिंग पॉडकास्ट। So, David, firstly, thank you so much for joining in. The first question that I had for you, and this is a field, personally, I'll let you know about myself, and I'm sure I'm speaking for Mohit as well. We are not amongst those who enjoy data that much, or the mathematical side of things. So this is something which we are really looking forward to because we want to be educated. The sport that we love so much has such a big influence of data. I think the fans right now would also love to get some shocking insights on how this is revolutionizing the sport. Firstly, how is data being used in what fields exactly by different franchises in the IPL or by different teams, internationally speaking?
So, to break down the question into multiple pieces, so we all use the word data very casually, but when you look at it a level deeper, especially in cricket, so there's wide variety of data. For example, live data, historical data, right? Score data, scorecard data, commentary data, ball tracking data, field mapping data, right? Then video analytics data. So there are all levels of data that is available, right? For example, let's say you are talking about something like a CricBuzz, right? Now everyone thinks that you are just refreshing CricBuzz, you're getting the scores, right? But that is not actually true. So there is a data provider who is providing data to CricBuzz, and that data is being shown via CricBuzz. So there is a data provider who is an intermediate in between. And how does that data provider have the data? They have people sitting in the stadiums. They have operators who are collecting data from multiple sources, right? So for example, let's take one ball. Okay, so one ball, first ball of a match. You won't believe for one ball there are about 60 plus data points that are collected.
What?
If I have, yes, 60 plus. So this was back in 2019. It could be more now. Right? So I don't get a chance to look at it deeper. If I just have to give you an insight on what kind of data points. Right? So for example, what is this tournament? Right? So it could be IPL, it could be BBL, it could be a bilateral series. Right? And then match number. Then you have team names, right? So who's the batting team, who's the bowling team, then who's the striker, who's the non-striker, who's the bowler, and which end is he bowling, right? So and then of course match date, stadium, will have that match timings. Then once
toss
the bowlers
also would be one.
Sorry,
I think toss would also be.
Yes, of course, toss. Yeah. So toss is like a pre-match, right? So once the match, even before the match starts, you have a metadata of a match, right? Then once the bowler starts bowling, so start of his run up, which end is he bowling, right? And all the way his run up. So nowadays they're also calculating run up speeds. How fast is the bowler bowling? Right? So what is his speed? Is it 20 kilometers per hour, 25 kilometers per hour? Then after he runs up, where is his release point? So release point is captured. And of course, is it a legal ball or is it a foot no ball? You check the foot, right? And then once he delivers, then you check where is it landing, the landing spot of the ball, right? And then once it lands, right, then you check the bounce, swing, spin, the deviation on the ball, right? And then once it reaches the batsman, did the batsman actually make a contact or did he not? If he missed it, then did the keeper collect it or did he miss it? Then if the batsman has made a contact, is it a good contact, bad contact, right? So did it edge, right? So did he hit in the middle of the bat? Then after he hits it, in which direction did it go? Right? Which angle, how far? Right? And then if it went in that particular direction, so did the fielder collect it? Was there a fielder there? Or did he misfield it? How many runs did he actually cost? Right? How many runs, if he has saved runs, how many runs did he actually save? Who was that fielder? And did he collect it properly or no? Then after he returns, is he returning it to the keeper or is he returning it to the bowler end? Right? So was there an extra? So this way there are like 60 plus data points for one ball. Yes, now you
and
can
all
imagine
of this is being shown on an application for us.
Minute, 10% is what you see.
Oh, damn.
And there are people actually sitting in the stadium and providing this information.
Yes. So for example, there's a company called Sports Interactive, right? So they have people in almost every country who are like a stadium operator. So they sit in the stadiums because there's a delay, right? So from stadium to your home, there's almost like a 10-15 second delay, right? So what you see on TV to versus what you get on the apps, right? So there's a delay, right? So that's why what people do is there are operators sitting inside the stadium updating on their own platforms, and that data is being transferred across.
Also, speaking about the teams in particular, I am assuming that stuff like the auction, the scouting process for the auction itself, we were also speaking off stage how the impact of players, how much they are contributing towards their team. That is all quantified by data analytics and data analysts. How is that happening exactly? And could you like share some insights on how is this carried out and how do teams make decisions based on this?
So that's a good question, and it's a very important thing because scouting and auction is the first step of building a team, right? So you have to be, whatever bets you're taking, so you have to be really sure about why you're taking these bets, right? It could go right, it could go wrong, but when you are placing the bet, you have to be clear why you are placing the bet, right? So that is where the whole process of scouting and auction plays a very important role. Now, before we get to data, so there are these scouts. These scouts, the idea of these scouts is to identify players who are special, right? So who had proper coaching. So these scouts, one day they would be in West Bengal watching a match, or next day they could be down south Bangalore somewhere, right? The life of a scout is very uncertain. They have to, they are made to travel. That is their whole idea. So the scout observes, so he spots, so these are the particular players, right? Because there's no way you can analyze thousands of players, right? So the job of this scout is to identify which players' metrics to look after, right? So let's say the scout in Pondicherry, he shortlisted 20 players, right? Now then comes the analysts. So in analysts also there are types of analysts. So there could be video analysts who are purely working on the videos. Like for example, let's say you are assigned KL Rahul, you are the video analyst of KL Rahul. The job of a video analyst is cut down the videos where KL Rahul has played and then share insights on every single clip. Is there something that you can add notes to it, right? So this was not a good shot, this was a good shot, right? You can keep adding to it. So this is the job of a video analyst. And then there are people who have access to the grassroots level data of a particular player. So nowadays we have crick heroes who can give you, at any given player you have data, right? And then of course BCCI also collects. So there's a bcci.tv website, so where you can get all domestic data, right? So whether it's Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy, Vijay Hazare Trophy, Ranji Trophy, all kinds of matches, you will find lots of data sets there, right? So if broadcasting is available, you will get proper video data. If broadcasting is not available, then there could be local broadcasters. So that will be a challenge. Like for example, in states like Jammu, right? So it's difficult to have broadcasters. So that's why people collect local data providers. So they connect with the local types. So if the match is not telecasted on Star Sports. So of course, there are a lot of data gaps also. Like sometimes you get data, sometimes you don't. Right. So with whatever data that is available, so the analysts, what they do is they design some metrics. Like for example, let's say control percentage. So if the batsman has played 100 balls, how many shots did he play with a control? So that becomes a metric. So his control percentage is this. Or there could be a metric about fall shot, right? So fall shot is very good from a bowler perspective because the bowler is able to make the batsman play a fall shot, right? Make the batsman play edge, right? So this bowler is able to induce like 85% fall shot or 30% fall shot. That's a good metric, right? So there is data, and on top of that data, you come up with some metrics, right? So what are some of the metrics to? So control is a metric, fall shot is a metric, or if it's for a fielder, how many catches did he drop? How many catches did he take? How many runs did he save? So that's a metric, right? So you are trying to chase these metrics depending on the role that the players are playing. So basically they identify openers, middle order, lower middle order, tailenders, or anchor roles, or hitters, right? So they identify power hitters, right? So they identify a segment of players. So for example, let's say RCB, right? So RCB does not have good death bowlers. So that's a known thing for everybody, right? So
is that the fan inside you speaking?
Yeah. So that's a known fact for everybody, right? So now for a death bowler, what are the metrics to look into? Right? If you are bowling in death, so obviously picking wickets is not the priority in death. You want to restrict the number of runs, right? So but in power play, it's not. In power play, it's all about picking wickets. In power play, if you pick 3 wickets, you have 85% chance of winning a game. Right. So power play is about picking wickets, death over is all about controlling runs, middle overs is also about containing runs plus holding the wickets. So every phase of play, every format has a demand, what is expected from a player. So according to that, metrics are designed, and these analysts are all chasing those metrics, right? So iterating these metrics, right? So if it's about picking the right fielder, you have these metrics. If it's about going after power hitter, these are the metrics. Opener, these are the metrics. So that is how they design. And then of course, internally, what are the combination? That's how you already have Virat as an opener, right? So who would be a better partner for him? Right? So you take those considerations also.
So when teams go into the IPL auction, they actually look for all these metrics for all these players and then decide whom they want to get.
Yes, probably I would have explained only 25% of it. There's so much more. For example, they build auction simulators. Like, so how much money do you need to keep for this particular player? Right? So what's the range? So they just simulate which teams go after. Like for example, let's say Rishabh Pant, right? Now they actually simulate systems which does the bidding.
Okay, so this is fully automated.
Yes, fully automated.
Damn.
Auction simulators, right? So they identify what would be the price range of that player, right? So which teams would be expected to go after him, right? So who would need him, who does not have a keeper, right? So they go after these kind of metrics also. And then they do, chat with players also, yeah.
Yeah, perhaps that's the reason why IPL teams want a whole month to prepare for the auction.
Yes. It starts all the way at probably 6 months down the line before the auction date is announced.
Okay, so let me just summarize what you said and correct me if I'm wrong. And I'll try to do a bit of it in Hindi also so that the audience is also feeling comfortable with it. Let me know if you don't understand, okay?
Yeah.
So what happens is, basically, teams के scouts होते हैं जो कि ईयर राउंड जो है स्टेडियम्स में जाके प्लेयर्स को देख रहे होते हैं. वो प्लेयर्स जो उनको पसंद आते हैं, द प्लेयर्स आर दे लाइक, वो उनको स्काउट करके एनालिस्ट को रिकमेंड करते हैं कि अब आप इनके डेटा को देखिए, एंड अमंगस्ट दोज प्लेयर्स जिनके डेटा इनसाइट्स हमें अच्छे लग रहे होंगे, बीट अ डेटा एनालिस्ट, बीट या वीडियो एनालिस्ट, सब मिलके एक टीम काम करती है, उन प्लेयर्स को फिर वो टारगेट करते हैं इन दी ऑक्शन कि हमने इन प्लेयर्स को स्काउट करा है, दे कुड बी अ पोटेंशियली बिग शॉट फॉर अस गोइंग इन फ्यूचर. इज दैट करेक्ट?
डेफिनेटली यस.
सो इस स्काउटिंग के चलते हुए, हैव यू एवर सीन any big purchase happening in the IPL who was not that big of a name earlier but then eventually became a big name?
Recently, Shashank, Singh and Ashutosh, right? So I've heard about them even before they were big names. I've heard it from the network that I knew, right? So they had, as I said, right? So people are looking for game changers, right? So like, who can change the match on their own, right? So these are that type of players. And if you look at their performance also, it actually reflected, right? So they are able to change the matches whether they play for 1 over, whether they play for 5 overs, they have their impact sort of, right? So yeah, so these are the couple of players that I've seen, like even before they became famous, from scouts to, so I heard about these names probably 2 years ago.
Achha, there's a very common misconception that I also had, that stats, when people say stats are not everything, what they are saying is that you cannot calculate the impact that a player has. You can just check that he has scored this many runs and this many balls, but what the situation was, what his exact impact was, you cannot calculate with that. But you are saying that it is actually like people can calculate that as well.
Yes, actually people calculate only that, like, because they are more interested in that. Because all the other metrics like your averages, strike rates, they don't tell you a story, right? So they are just a picture, right? So for a given period of time, this is the strike rate, this is the average, right? So not outs, all of that, right? But impact actually tells you a story. Whether the player actually made an impact, so then his values will be positive. If he has not made an impact, it would be close to zero. If he is actually not contributed, his values will be negative. So that gives you more clarity. And this impact considers, so I mean averages, strike rates, all of them, they don't consider match situation or even the strength of a team, right? So whether you are playing against Australia, Bangladesh, it does not matter. They don't reflect, correct, right? So but this impact calculation, it actually counts into match situations, right, or strength of the team, right? So who's the opponent bowler, right? So what's the chance of him picking up a wicket? All of that is considered here, right? So at a deeper level, impact is one of the major metrics compared to all the other runs or runs per innings or averages, strike rates.
I think इसका एक बहुत अच्छा एग्जाम्पल था अभी जब रमनदीप सिंह when he was playing for KKR this season. There was a stat that उन्होंने पूरे सीजन में approximately 100 balls के आसपास ही खेली हैं. But the impact that he created was so big that now he's retained by the team. I think like people do calculate the impact on the basis of the amount of contribution in the team and not just on hardcore stats that, okay, he has played 100 balls, is his strike rate is above 150 or not, is his average is above 30 or not. I'm assuming that these stats are studied individually for all the players as well, depending on what position they're coming on to bat or to bowl.
Yeah, so I mean there are multiple ways of calculating this impact. So one way is how much did they contribute for the team to win or make the team win or increase the chances of winning the team. Like for example, let's say 12 needed of 3 balls. Right? So if you played all the 3 dot balls, so that means you didn't help the team, right? But if you've hit couple of sixes, so that means you've changed the match even before the all balls are completed, right? So that means how much are you contributing to make the team win? So that is what impact is mostly about.
You know, I actually intend on diving deeper on this whole debate of who is creating more impact in the second segment. Right now, I'll elaborate further on the auction itself because right now the flavor is exactly that amongst the audience and they want to know more about this. Let's actually dive deeper into it. I'm really enjoying your insights. You said how this is perhaps just 25% of what teams do when preparing for the auction. You also mentioned how this process starts approximately 6 months before the auction has even begun. So we spoke about scouting. We spoke about how those scouts are recommending those players to be taken in the auction. How do you simulate all these auctions and practice for it firstly? And then why do we see that some teams do better than the other teams if every one of them have their own scouts, have their own simulations? Why do some teams always perform better? We have seen a trend. With all due respect, RCB, I don't believe is one of them.
Definitely, yes.
But teams like CSK, like Mumbai, sometimes KKR, this time SRH as well, they do really good. Even Rajasthan Royals. So why do some teams keep on performing better if all of them have these luxuries at disposal?
I mean, so just to add a point, right? So numbers is not everything. That is more true for sports, right? So whatever the analysis, the systems, the processes, the simulators, I would say it's just 50% of it. The other 50% is all about the decisions that you make on the field or the decisions that you make on the auction table. Right? So all the groundwork is accounts to 50% of the decision making process, right? So I mean, here everyone has almost, I would say, equal amount of tech, equal amount of companies who can give you this type of data. So everyone is in a level playing field until this 50%. but the other 50% is what makes a difference, right? So do you have the right people on the auction table, right? So do you have that's what matters. For example, I would say for RCB the biggest problem is the people sitting on the auction table, right? So that could be a problem, right? So maybe for other teams, let's say Gambhir is doing well because he's sitting on the auction table, right? The decision maker is actually sitting on the auction table. It makes a difference.
Can I just add one more point here? Just one more question. So when you mentioned that perhaps the people that are sitting at the auction table makes a difference, naturally I think the audience would ask कि यार ऐसा क्यों है? क्योंकि अगर सबके पास डेटा है, सबने ऑक्शन सिमुलेट कर रखा है, तो चाहे इंसान कोई भी हो, उनको पहले से पता है कि ऑक्शन में क्या पोटेंशियल टारगेट्स हो सकते हैं और उनकी प्राइस कितनी जा सकती है. तो जब वो ऑलरेडी वो चीज़ प्रैक्टिस कर चुके हैं, तो वो क्यों नहीं वो चीज़ रेप्लिकेट कर पा रहे ऑक्शन में? माई गेस इज कि it is not just about simulations. Auctions don't always turn out that way and you have to improvise, and वो improvisation की quality हर किसी में नहीं होती. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, definitely, right? So simulation is nothing but what it has seen historically, right? So it is trying to understand what happened in the past and trying to help you understand and estimate the future, but it never tells you the actual future, right? So things can, I mean, that's the true even for cricket also, right? See, if data can tell everything, why even watch a cricket match, right? We watch it because there's an uncertainty, right? That is what keeps us hooked to the game, right? So that makes a lot of difference, right? So you can tell the estimates, you can tell which bowler can get which batsman, but you can't 100% tell which ball, what way, right? So when is he getting out? So you can't tell, right? You will be there. So I can tell you from my experience, all the prediction algorithms that we've built are about 66% accurate.
That's actually very good, to be honest.
Yes, right? I mean, if you're at 66%, you are like absolutely, I mean, 66 to 70 is a world-class bracket.
So all the IPL teams working with David at least know that 66% is fixed in the auction and they know what is going to happen. I think more teams should contact you.
Let's see. Yeah. So, I mean, so people think that whenever you build any machine learning models, it has to be 90% accurate, 95% accurate. Oh, is it only 70, right? But in sports, even if you're at 60, 70, you are absolutely world class. Actually, even if you're at above 50%, you are good, right? So if you want to chase the world class, then 60 plus is the percentage. So what does it tell, right? So that means the other 35% is not accountable, right? So what the data says, right? So it's all in your hands. What the bowler does on the field, what the management does on the auction table, it's left to you, right? So yeah, I think it's the on-field decisions, on-table decisions that matter as well, like not just the simulators or the estimates.
Acha, about that auction thing, so you said how 66% can be predicted perhaps, or you are doing it currently. So the remaining 34%, I'm very curious to know, what does it constitute of primarily? The kind of cases where a player which was predicted to be at a certain price exceeds it or is shockingly lower?
Okay, so I mean the 66%, just to be clear, so 66% is, I just gave a average number across multiple predictions. It could be auction prediction, it could be who's winning, win prediction, score prediction, all of that, right? So 65, 66 is the golden mark out there, right? Now, okay, so now coming to the other 35%. So, for example, in auction, there are, I think this year auction, there are about 1500 players who are enrolled into the auction, right? Now, the simulators or the prediction systems, they are all trained on the data that was fed, right? So purely, probably statistical data, right? May not be LLM data or what the scouts have seen. So because I believe in sports it always runs little behind, right? So compared to other world, so sports actually runs behind a few years, right? So when it comes to technology, right? So for example, let's say the scout has seen something special about that player, like for example, is capable of playing an offside delivery even to convert it to a leg side 6, something like that, right? So sometimes the data may not be able to reflect it, right? So for some reason, maybe tech was not available in that match, right? So you don't find that data there. So line and length was there, but the ball tracking was not there, right? So there could be all sorts of data gaps. but the scout has this information, right? So now these kind of things, they miss out in the whole prediction systems, right? So that these kind of gaps are there. So in these cases, what the scout does is he communicates it to the analyst, and then the analyst they communicate it to the management. Sometimes what they do is if they feel the need to collect data, the scouts call up the players for example, let's say I'm a scout in Pondicherry. I've seen some player X, so I communicate this to the RCB team, and the RCB team asks the player X to come to Chinnaswamy and have a session. They try to validate whether the points that were mentioned by scout are correct or wrong. Right? So these kind of things also happen. So when they feel that this data needs to be collected. Right?
So I was wondering, why don't the scouts are made to be, present in the auction and in fact play a major role while deciding the auction strategy? Why do we see owners and their kids, raising the paddle and not actually the people who matter?
Right. See, I mean, the scout, if you would, let's say two players are playing, tell us who's a better player on the ground, the scout does the job. But if in the moment you involve prize money, what's the auction, right? So who's bidding, that team is coming after him, this team is coming after him. There's too much calculation going around. And that too, it's not cricket. Right? This has nothing to do with cricket. Right? Scout's job is done once he identifies the talent. Right? So to take a decision, he may not be the right person.
I also wonder, when you're preparing so intensely for your own auction strategy, suppose I'm a part of RCB and मुझे अपनी टीम के लिए अभी से 20 players चाहिए because I've just retained 3 players. So I'll have simulations, I'll have scouts, I'll be running through all sorts of data. Now what happens is, auction is a relative phenomena. You're not just sitting there fighting with yourself for a player. You have 9 other opponents that you have to fight and win over a player for. So I'm wondering, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the teams are also actively looking into the auction strategies or the potential auction strategies of other teams and trying to manipulate that as well?
No, it's not at that level, at least as far as I know, because that will be, insanely heavy, that too with 10 teams playing. Like, there could be like n number of combinations, right? So you are more worried about yourself rather than what other teams want to try to do. If you get into that, you're completely lost, right? So you will forget your strategy if you are going too much around.
So that's a limitation of resource essentially.
Yes.
I see. Also, अच्छा, हमने ये बात करी about the scouting, the auctions. In big tournaments like the IPL, like, let's be honest, right now it is the biggest tournament in the sport, apart from, of course, the World Cups. What other ways are teams using data right now, which could be in-game, which could be in the dressing room while selecting the playing 11 for a team? And how is it actually affecting the sport going forward?
Right. That's a good question. So we often analyze or judge a player just by looking at the stats. Now, the problem with cricket is it's not a regular sport. Like, for example, if you play a match today, the next match would be like, let's say 3 days later, 4 days later, sometimes 1 month later, sometimes 2-3 months later, right? It's not, if you look at football, NBA, it's a regular, like every day, almost every day they play frequently, right? So there, the data is very powerful because you can actually visually see the patterns because they're playing more frequently, almost daily or alternatively, right? So this happens. But in cricket, it does not, right? So what happens, and that too, in cricket, you have so many variables as well. The pitch is different, conditions are different, the pitch soil is different, right? And then the ends are different, right? So many variables. But in other sports, there's not much variables in terms of at least the conditions or the environment, right? For example, let's take badminton court. Most of the times it has nothing to do with the surface of the court, right? But here it does make a difference, right? So cricket is actually probably one of the toughest to make sense of the data, right? Now, okay, so you are collecting all the data that is happening during the action. So whenever a match is played, you are collecting the data. But what the teams also do is in between matches, what is going on, right? So how many practice sessions, and for each practice session, how many balls were being bowled. So even that is being tracked nowadays. So every practice session, net session is being tracked, recorded, right? So and analyzed as well.
That's actually a big thing.
Yes, it is. It is because between match to match, so let's say the player did not perform in the couple of matches, and then something happened in between, and then he started performing well, right? Now, how do you connect these two, right? So there's something that happened in between, right? So that is why they are trying to collect data, what is happening in between.
So how do you exactly make sense of this? Of the data that is accumulated during the training sessions?
Yeah, so even training sessions, there's performance analysts who are sitting and analyzing net sessions also. The number of throws, number of, what was the area that the player was trying to improve? Like for example, let's say he's trying to improve in sweep shot. That is the objective of the net session, right? So they actually judge you, how far have you improved, right? Compared to your previous session or this session. Have you gotten better? Are you going worse, right? So they actually keep track of, and in fact, even before every practice session, so they do some assessment tests, like is their balance right? So are them, the grips or the bottom hand play, the top hand play. So they do some assessments just to judge. So for example, their score was 80 in the previous session. So this session is 75. So where are the gaps? They tend to correct those mistakes within this session. So even practice sessions, they're highly data oriented nowadays.
अभी जो आपने ये बोला था कि पिच का भी काफ़ी इफेक्ट पड़ता है, एंड क्रिकेट में इतने सारे फैक्टर्स है कि यू कांट एग्जैक्टली जज कि किस प्लेयर ने कैसा खेला और क्यों ऐसा खेला. सो जब आप इम्पैक्ट क्रिएट करते हो, जब आप इम्पैक्ट कैलकुलेट करते हो, तो ये पिच कंडीशंस ये सब भी अकाउंट में लेते हैं.
हाँ, so this तो so when I was at cricket.com, so we used to work with IBM also. So IBM has weather.com, right? So how does a pitch behave under certain weather conditions? That's all of that. But what we realized is कि there's no correlation. That's what we identified. So statistically, as a fan, what we tend to see is we have those one or two instances where we feel कि that pitch actually made a difference, right? But in reality, it's not. That too, for limited overs, it's very difficult to correlate. But if it's a test match, okay, it makes sense. In test match, so what we do is we call a decay factor, because the behavior of the pitch deteriorates from day 1 to day 5, right? So there's a decay factor, right? So every pitch has a different decay factors depending on the bounce or the turn that you get, right? So for test match, it makes sense, the pitch behavior. But as the overs get limited overs, as it gets to limited overs, 50 over, 20 over, now 10 overs. So the behavior of the pitch does not matter too much in these systems.
Actually, this is so interesting because my natural question was going to be that we just lost the 2023 ODI World Cup last year. And one of the biggest critical points for Rohit Sharma was that why did he choose to, or rather why did he say that we are comfortable batting first after losing the toss? Even though the pitch was clearly favoring the team chasing. And his statement could mean two things. He was trying to bluff it out because he did not want to show that India also wanted to chase. Secondly, the analyst that was, or the team that was working with our country at that point of time perhaps read the pitch incorrectly. So is there any way that data allows us to read the pitch correctly as well and then arrive at a good decision on what do you want to do if you win the toss?
So there are multiple facets to it. So first of all, there are some equipments like you put it inside a pitch and it will tell you how hard the pitch is, how loose the soil is. There are some equipments which tells you some metrics about the pitch, right? But it's very hard to make a decision because the pitch behavior you don't know until the first ball is bowled. You have no idea, right? It's very difficult. But I think Australians are highly competitive. They're always way ahead than us. For example, if you are following the Australia-Pakistan ODI series that is happening right now, I think Pakistan managed to win the series as well. So they are actually showing something like a launch speed, launch angle, things like this, right? But when it comes to Indian broadcasters, it's all about creating dramas or hype around it. But when it comes to actual analytics and all, we are way too behind.
In fact, if you see this with Big Bash League and the IPL, the graphics and the stats shown are on a completely different level in the Big Bash League.
Yes, definitely, right? So even, I mean, it has to do with the people as well. Like for example, in Australia, there's a test called 2-mile test, right? So how fast can you run 2 miles? But in India, there's no such thing, right? So people are not used to these kind of things. So Australia, people love these kind of, like, whether it's about numbers or sport, they're always, ahead of everyone else. That's why it's a sporting nation. It's way ahead compared to other countries, because people ultimately the broadcasters and all, they care about what people want, right? So their people are waiting for it, so they create that kind of ecosystem that, get better at broadcasting analytics, even for players, right? So all of that, right? So I think it has something not only to do with the analysts or the players, it has to come from the people also.
आई थिंक कैपेबिलिटी तो हमारे पास भी है ये सब चीज़ें दिखाने की, बट वही है कि क्या पब्लिक उस चीज़ में इंटरेस्टेड है, एंड परहैप्स दैट इज़ वाई IPL की व्यूअरशिप इतनी ज़्यादा बेटर भी है BBL से.
I think one other reason is that the audience, of course, we can talk about the audience all we want. The resources at disposal for BCCI is much bigger than any other cricketing board right now. If despite that you see a conscious choice to not upgrade in data analytics, would you say, David, that India perhaps is not investing that much into data analytics field as much as they should for cricket in India?
Definitely, right? So I would definitely say, I would say easily we are like 3-4 years behind the cutting edge tech that happens. Because if you look at all the advanced systems that are already built, whether it's Hawkeye, ball tracking, Hotspot, most of them are outside India. They're built either in Australia, they're built in England, some of the systems are built in New Zealand also. But in India, there are very, very few. I can't even name that came out of India. Right? So there's a company called Quidditch, which is doing some amazing work. So for example, the real-time field tracking that you see on TV, it's done by an Indian company. So the buggy cams that are operated, that is also done by an Indian company, right? So private companies are doing it, but if it comes from BCCI, if the initiatives come, right? So for R&D efforts, we would have been elsewhere. So definitely other countries are much ahead, especially England, Australia and New Zealand, they're way ahead.
I think that's a great segue into our next segment, where I want to discuss some pain points of cricket that we witness as fans. And the first one is related to exactly what you said. We'll discuss the DRS system a bit. We were talking off stage how you guys also developed ball tracking systems for several IPL teams. I wonder why BCCI has always been hesitant of the DRS. Like if you remember in the 2011 World Cup, it was made mandatory by ICC to introduce the DRS system into the tournament, even though it was being hosted by India, and they were not very happy with that decision. I'll give you some context on it. You add on the rest. So initially, as I studied, I got to know that India were not really interested in having their DRS system whenever teams are visiting India, because technologies like the hotspot or the ball tracking 10 years back was not that accurate. And the logic given by BCCI was that the whole point of having DRS is to introduce systems that will help eliminate the errors conducted by the umpires. If that technology in itself is error prone, what is the point of having that tech in the first place? That thing certainly has been upgraded with the rise in the technology, but do you still feel that BCCI is a bit hesitant when it comes to systems like the DRS, and how could they be improved?
So, to answer the first point, I think whenever a new system or a new technology comes, it's very hard for people to adapt, right? Because naturally you're not used to it, right? So there's always something new that is coming in. So same applies here also, right? So it could make them think that why are we even using an umpire, right? If this system is doing everything, right? So why do we need an umpire, right? So it makes them go in all sorts of directions. So that's why they're too adamant about using any new tech. So that is always their with a new tech anywhere, right? But cut down to 2024, this year actually Wimbledon, there will be no line calling. So it's all done by the systems. So it's all done by the live tracking systems, right? So unless people see it, right, so they don't believe it, right? So that's always there. Now, I mean, the systems, they always come with an error, right? So there is no doubt about it. No system is perfect.
How much error can we expect?
So when the Hawkeye systems, I think it was designed way back in 2002, 2004 times. So although it may be live much later, but the systems were designed much earlier, 2003, 2004, right? So probably it started around 90% accurate, right? Now all these systems, they have to be trained to get better. Right? Otherwise they don't know how to get better, right? So that's why you need a cooling period where the system has to improve from 90% to 95%. So it takes a lot of effort, right? From 90 to 95 I mean 0 to 80 is achievable. 80 to 90 is possible, but 90 to 95, unless you are like a world-class tech dedicated, having brilliant minds put together, working on it, it's very hard. So when it comes to the AI kind of tech, so Hawkeye is also an AI tech. It's like a prediction system, right? Because you don't know, nobody knows how the ball is behaving after it. It's trying to estimate, it's trying to predict. It's a prediction system, right?
Okay, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but my perception of the Hawkeye system up till now was that it is basically calculating the trajectory of the ball after pitching till the point it actually hits the pad of the batter, and then it is predicting on the same lines that the distance that between the pad and the wicket would be covered in the same trajectory, in the same direction. So there's not much involvement of the AI. But you are saying something which is totally different from what I was believing.
Yeah. So it's a prediction system, right? So people think that it's like a magic. Like it actually tells you the magic, what is going to happen, right? So, but it's not, unfortunately, right? So, I mean, for example, if the ball is traveling till here, what happened here, nobody knows unless it happens, right? So you are trying to estimate. So this estimation is happened via some kind of machine learning models, some kind of 3D coordinate systems. You collected a lot of historical data, judging a lot of players. Like for example, the DRS system, for a full toss ball, it actually takes more time. Why? Because you also have to judge where it bounces. Apart from the trajectory, so if it's a ball normal delivery after the bounce, you predict it. But if it's a full toss, if you observe, the delay is much higher in full toss balls because the ball has to be judged where it pitches, and then after pitching, where does it go, right? So it's a prediction system trying to predict. There's a very good video by Fox Cricket about how the ball tracking system works. It's a beautiful video, right?
I think Nasir Hussain was in that video.
Yeah.
So Nasir Hussain explains about the DRS.
Umpire's call.
Definitely, right? So
what do you think about that? The umpire's call, adding to it.
So umpire's call, I mean, there are two ways to answer it. One way is, see, any prediction system it comes with an error, right? Now, for example, instead of umpire call, let's say I call it error. Nobody will believe the system. That because you are using the word error, right? So umpire call is actually a substitute of a term, of an error. Right? In my perception, that's what it is. Because so any system is 99% accurate or 99.5% accurate. So there is some amount of error. So that error is being called as an umpire's call.
That's a very honest perspective.
Exactly, right? So, yeah, I mean, for cricketers to understand, for people to understand, for common people to understand, you give it a name. So that name is called umpire's call. So umpire is made to take all the blame here. So can't help.
I think even players को awareness थोड़ी ज़्यादा provide करनी चाहिए क्योंकि we see time and time again very high profile players come out and speak against the use of umpire's call or DRS system. Even guys like Virat Kohli have said it. उनसे ऊंचा आप कितना ही जाओगे?
Virat, I think he stares at the umpire after every DRS call. So yeah, so that we've seen.
Yeah.
I think the main point here that I believe Mohit is also trying to make is, so it is very well established that the DRS system is not going to be 100% accurate. That's just the outcome of the technology and the times that we live in. Perhaps in future, 100 years from now, we'll have technologies that can predict it with 100% accuracy. In that circumstance, Okay, we talked about the Hawkeye. There was another technology that was very controversial and some people want it to be back again, which was the hotspot technology. I'm sure you would be aware of that as well. And one of the biggest controversies with that technology was that if you actually rub Vaseline on the edges of the bat, it will stop showing if the ball was edged by the bat or not.
Correct.
And I think there was another thing that if you have something metallic on the bat, I could be wrong, then that would also protect you from displaying that edge on the bat. Do you, in your experience, believe that these technologies can be improved, or if there is a better alternative to it that already exists but is not mainstream right now?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So, I mean, the systems can be hacked in multiple different ways. As you said, so applying Vaseline or using a different bat material or some kind of a sticker on top of the bats, because the way it works is when you rub two things, it identifies that there is a friction between these two, right? So it identifies that. So this technology is actually used in defense to identify enemy movement. So whenever an enemy moves, so it tries to identify the spot. So that's what the idea of this technology was. Now it's got into cricket.
The hotspot technology?
Yeah. So it's used in military. So the cameras that are used, these are called infrared cameras. It's a 4 camera setup. So 2 cameras this way, 2 cameras this way. And it tries to identify the ball connection between the bat or a pad. Right. So there also you have 2 objects. So whenever an enemy is moving, rubbing against some kind of a surface or is walking, right. So that means there's a, between 2 objects, there's a friction, right. So so it identifies that whenever 2 objects are rubbing each other, there's a temperature change that happens in the surroundings. It identifies those intensities and you get the white spots. So that's the magic behind it, right? So same thing here also. So how do you identify that? So Vaseline and all substituting to not make that change, right? Not make that temperature change, not make that friction change. Now, there is no single solution to it, right? So there are multiple, I mean, just for ball tracking alone, you have Snicko, you have, different versions of it that have come up. Still, I mean, there could be somewhere down the line, maybe we can have some sensors inside the ball itself, maybe, or inside the equipment pads, something, right? So smarter systems will always, I mean, in fact, even now, I think there's some research that Kookaburra is doing, putting a sensor inside the ball while it is being manufactured itself. Right, so if you have noticed the Football World Cup, they were actually charging the Football World Cup.
Exactly. I was about to say that.
So now in cricket also you will see it, like, so where you will get more metrics like so the idea of putting a sensor inside the ball is to identify metrics like this. Where are the connections made? How many revs are there on the ball when a spinner is bowling, right? Or how does the speed of the ball change before bouncing, after bouncing? How much speed is the batsman hitting the ball after he makes a contact, right? So many metrics that you can discover, right? The tech will always get better and better and better. It only gets better. So there is no way that from 99% it's going to 98%. It only stays at 99 or 99.01, right? So it only gets better and it will always be better than a normal umpire who's standing and making those decisions, right? So the job is to utilize the tech, and wherever the tech is making a mistake, so there you involve the human efforts there.
So there has always been controversy about the hotspot system, but recently Snickometer में भी ये चीज़ हुई थी in the recent test match इंडिया वर्सेस न्यूजीलैंड में, जब ऋषभ पंत का बैट जब वो पैड पे लगा था, बट स्नीकोमीटर शोड कि इट वाज विद द बॉल, कॉन्टैक्ट वाज विद द बॉल, एंड सो ही वाज गिवन आउट. सो रिसेंटली ही मुझे लगा कि स्नीकोमीटर में भी देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ चांस कि अ मिस्टेक हैपेंस.
Yes, I mean, see, what is a Snickometer? Snickometer is audio video, right? So what it does is it identifies the audio wave and then it syncs that audio wave to the frame. And so what is the exact frame? So that's what it is telling. So there's a noise and then there's a video, right? It's not telling you whether the batsman has actually hit the ball or not. It tells you that there is a disturbance. So maybe in future we might see a system which tells you there's a deviation in the ball, right? So after he makes a contact, even a slightest of the deviation. So current ball tracking systems are not able to account for that small deviation. So maybe in future we can expect some kind of a deviation systems that will help us understand it, or maybe the revolutions that the ball has made after the contact is different from before, right? So yeah, maybe we can expect some tech around those.
The cricket nerd inside me is loving this conversation, getting to know about the technicalities of how things happen. We actually spoke about how the the hotspot and the Hawkeye works. Could you also explain how the Snickometer catches such fine sound waves that are like sometimes not even recognized by the batter himself or the umpire present or the wicketkeeper just behind? What equipment is there and how is it catching those sound waves exactly?
Yeah, so some days before it was actually just an audio signal that was being captured, but now they're actually putting the mics connected to the stumps. So that is where you are getting the audio feed, right? Now, as a natural fan, have you watched any match in the stadium?
I have once, but it was a domestic game, not a professional international game. Yeah.
For example, if you watch, so I watched. I stay in Bangalore, so I would experience at least once in Chinnaswamy. So I've been to few matches. Insanely noisy, like so many speakers around, right? People are shouting, mic announcements, right? And then cheerleaders, that music, this music, some firecrackers, all kinds of noises are there, right? Now, what this mic does is it collects the audio from everywhere, right? So whether players are speaking, whether the batsman is tapping the bat, right, or making a contact, every audio is captured. So what the technology here is all about elimination. Every time they eliminate the noise. So they eliminate crowd noise, so that is gone. They eliminate music system noise, that is gone. They eliminate conversations between the players, that is gone. And after everything is gone, what you're left with is what we see on the Snicko. So that is how it works.
And this is all done by AI.
Yes, analyzing audio and video is the toughest. You have to be on point. You have to use some brilliant minds plus some kind of world-class tech that you need to. The mic that is capturing all these noises, you have to think about how to develop that mic itself. There could be a lot of design because that mic, what if that mic gets hit, right? So sometimes the mic is placed under the ground, right? So how do you design that entire mic so that it can capture all of this, right? So there's a lot of R&D efforts that go into physical infrastructure plus the software tech that goes as well.
Just out of curiosity, is this the same mic that catches Rohit Sharma abusing from time to time?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the same one. Yeah.
Okay, so actually let's move on to one of the biggest pain points of all generations of cricket fans, not just this one which is so tech savvy. It is the DLS method. From time to time, people have said how DLS method is kind of outdated, does not give an accurate picture. There are better Indian systems out there. That is also something that I've heard. Would you like to elaborate on this from a data analytics point of view?
Definitely. Right. So the DLS system, again, it is a system that evolved, I think, all the way from 1992, if I'm not wrong. So the match between South Africa and Australia, where they had to score 22 runs in one ball, right? So it started from there, right? So even before that, it was there. A typical system. So this DLS system, you won't believe, I think it went about probably 10 iterations all the way from 1970s, 80s till today.
Okay.
The long lasting one is this DLS. The current system is the long lasting one, which is there, I think, for the last 15, 12 years, nobody has touched it so far. So you can fairly say this is better than compared to all the previous versions that we have come up with.
But this is still clearly not the best outcome out there, right? Like, I don't know, I cannot recall the name exactly of the guy, but an Indian guy created a system, VJ system or something
VJD
like that.
system. VJD system, yes.
Yeah. So, is it actually better than, or rather more accurate than the DLS method, in your opinion?
Okay, so, the first thing is actually, there is no way to measure the accuracy of these systems, the DLS systems, right? Because see, what does it do? It is all about estimating what if the match overs got reduced, right? So how much target should the team chase, right?
Could you please tell how it calculates that?
Yeah, so definitely, right? So for example, let's take a 20 over match. So 20 overs. Now first innings happened smoothly, so it's all good. Now second innings, it started raining, right? So now the time that they are left with is only 5 overs. And so for 5 overs, what should be the target? So that is what the system has to decide. Now, so let's say system 1 says these many runs, system 2 says these many runs, system 3 says these many runs. Now there is no way for us to judge which is right, first of all. Right? So first of all, there is no accuracy at all. Right? So to measure. So this system is this accurate, this system is that accurate. Nobody has a way. I mean, you can say one crude way is get 100 people on board, ask everybody, and let's say 70 people agreed on system 1. Right? So that means 70% accurate. You can find out these crude ways. But mathematically or systematically, there is no way. Right? Now, how these systems are designed is, so again, there's a lot of high level math that is involved. So, I mean, the 3 people who developed this, they are all PhDs in mathematics and statistics, right? So, very complicated system, right? Now, it's basically a curve, just one curve. So, what does this curve stand for is, one side there is number of overs and other side there is number of wickets, right? So, you have 0 to 10 wickets, 0 to 20 overs. Now, what this graph tells is, now I have a situation, 5 overs, 10 wickets in hand. Now you go back to that graph and you plot that point. So 5 overs, 10 wickets. That point is what the score is. I mean, you get a value out of it. So that is how you calculate. So there's some calculation after that. But basically this graph is what decides the whole score.
And this is not going to be 100%
All,
accurate.
right? So that's what the DLS system was about. Now, the flaw in the system is, see, in T20, we have designed that first 6 overs is power play, then you have middle overs, then you have death overs. But this system does not know any of this. This system knows 0 to 20 overs, 0 to 10 wickets. It draws a curve here, right? Now, what this VJD system does is, it takes into account this is a power play, this is played differently. This is middle overs, this also played differently. This is death overs, this played differently. So you can't have one same curve for all the 3 phases. So you have to account for these phases of play in these curves as well. So that is what this VJD system tries to explain. So this was used in some of, I think, couple of seasons of IPL as well. In many of the Indian domestic tournaments, they use the VJD system.
Why is it not being completely accepted by the ICC and implemented in all the countries if it clearly sounds better and more comprehensive than the DLS method? And the fact that you're pointing this glaring mistake out in that system, that it does not account for the fact that game is played differently in the power play, in the middle overs and the death overs. Like, this is something that a guy who has started watching cricket just a month back would also know. Why is ICC not taking action on this?
Yeah, I mean, for any cricket system, it has to undergo a lot of these policies. People have to accept, associations have to accept, and so people who have designed the system should also accept. There's so many things. I think, for example, the ICC rating system, it was designed way back in 1990, but for it to get live, it took like 10 years time. So, I mean, all these systems, like, they are like that, right? So it has to be accepted. Acceptance is the first thing. Okay, so you say the system is better, but are the countries ready to accept? Are the associations ready to accept? So that's where the question mark is. Why do you want a change in the system that is already working? Right? So they don't want to change it. They don't want to have new systems every single time. So you are saying power play, but next time some other guy says maybe first over is different, other overs are different. So will you keep changing? Right? So this kind of acceptance is still not there.
Perhaps now that Jay Shah is our ICC chairman,
probably yes.
It will help our case.
Actually, now let's segue into some of the fan favorite players and we'll try to learn some things about them with your expert insights. So my first generic question is, we see legends like Mahendra Singh Dhoni, a recent phenomena when Gautam Gambhir entered the coaching space. I heard him say in an interview that how he is very instinct based and does not rely too much on what the data says. We have seen MS Dhoni take decisions on the field that defy data and logic sometimes, and still there is a magic factor to him. You call it instinct or sixth sense or whatever, but he pulls that off. So as a data analyst who is also advocating for investing more money into this field and implementing this on a much grander scale across different sports in the country, where do you keep a place for players like MS Dhoni and Gautam Gambhir who sometimes defy data and logic? Like, what is the balance between them?
See, I don't 100% agree with what Gambhir has said, because probably CSK would be the team who has every single data point, right? So they might have, yes. So they would have, I mean, the magic is not in the data, right? It's the person who takes that, who consumes that data, right? So maybe other people, so let's say I give you 100 data points. You are trying to consume all the 100, but the person who's like a person of MS Dhoni or Gambhir, they are trying to look at 5 things that they want, right? So I mean, their elimination of noise is much clearer than others, right? So that's why they are so better in decision making, right? So but the data is available. The data is I mean, you can't say that you are taking decisions without data. That is 100% false, right? Because everybody has access to data 100%, whether it's field placement, bowling changes, you have every single data point. I mean, you name a player, there's a strategy well designed how to get that player out by a list of bowlers, what areas to bowl, what field set, everything is available, right? But as I said, you can't observe 100 things, right? You need to point out the thing that matters the most, and these players, they are much better at identifying what are those 5 points that matter the most.
And those points can differentiate depending on the player that is accessing that data?
Yes. I mean the confidence, see, maybe you have particular, let's say Ajinkya Rahane's pick, right? So everybody thinks that he's a test player, maybe his averages are low, he's not suitable for short format. But Dhoni saw something in him that, right, so he can hit sixes, he also wants to make a name for his case for T20, right? So he identified something in that player and that got him going, right? So
बेसिकली आपके पास डेटा हमेशा अवेलेबल रहता है, बट हाउ यू इंटरप्रेट दैट डेटा एंड किस डेटा को आप कितनी इंपॉर्टेंस दोगे उस पर डिपेंड करेगा.
And I'm assuming that this whole phenomena of CSK taking old players and making them young again has some data behind it as well, which perhaps is not available to the public.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so sometimes you have to come up with patterns which are not even seen, right? So I think those are done better by CSK compared to others. Like, for example, sticking to same players for a longer run, right? So these are also done by MI and CSK, while other teams are still trying to chase. Punjab is still again refactoring the whole team, right? They still haven't figured out, right? So yeah,
I think that's a very good insight into how data can assist your sixth sense, and then that perhaps becomes the perfect recipe. Now, actually coming to perhaps the point that I am very excited about. So there are 2 big names right now playing for India, Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli, right? And अभी दोनों ने ही recently T20 format से retirement लिया है after winning the World Cup for the country. And आजकल, I don't know how much aware are you exactly about this phenomena, but because we're in the content space, there is a constant ongoing fight between Rohit Sharma fans and Virat Kohli fans, and they try to belittle each other's idols. And one thing about Virat Kohli is that he is considered as Mr. T20 to a certain extent, T20Is rather, where he has scored so many runs, has performed in so many T20 World Cups, is a chase master. And Rohit Sharma has had a resurgence in recent years where his intent has become the talk point for all the cricket fans, where he creates a lot of impact just by the sheer game style that he has adopted in his late 30s. एंड एक ये जो लड़ाई है ना, आजकल ये लड़ाई इस नए नैरेटिव पे आ गई है कि विराट कोहली स्लो खेलते हैं T20 फॉर्मेट, एंड सो आप कितने भी रन मार लो, बट अगर आपका इम्पैक्ट नहीं हो रहा तो कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है. रोहित शर्मा शायद जल्दी आउट हो जाएंगे, लेकिन इम्पैक्ट ज़्यादा डालते हैं टीम में. अब अमंग्स दीज 2 प्लेयर्स, डू यू हैव एनी इनसाइट्स टू जज हु क्रिएट्स मोर इम्पैक्ट?
Okay, I think from the numbers that I have seen, so when it matters the most, that means very high pressure situations or a lot at stake, Virat definitely tends to perform better compared to most players, because he loves those challenges as well, right? So that we have seen it in the recent World Cup as well, right? So still did it, right? So even when the wickets were falling around him, right? So he's still there, right? So he definitely loves challenges and high stake situations, right? On the other side, Rohit, I mean, his tendency is to I mean, naturally as an opener, his idea is to give the team a good start, right? So regardless of the situation, regardless of the target to chase or the surface, does not matter to him. He tries to give the team a good start. So I mean, he always tries to play in the top gear, right? So that sometimes leads to wicket, sometimes doesn't work. In all cases, could be one of the cases for the recent test match series as well, right? So trying to go aggressively, right? Even though there's no thing in the wicket, right? So yeah, I mean, in terms of impact, Virat actually has a higher impact in the latest ones, but Rohit also has done well, right? So I think 2019 World Cup, Rohit had 5 centuries if I'm not wrong. So just in the World Cup itself, 700 plus runs, right? So but in the recent times, definitely Virat has better impacts, at least in the T20 internationals.
Which as a data analyst yourself, I wanted to ask you, जो final की innings थी T20 World Cup 2024 final, जब विराट कोहली played that knock, do you think उनका impact positive में जाएगा या 0 पे जाएगा या negative में जाएगा? Especially when the score was 50 of 48 balls.
So I mean, definitely positive, क्योंकि when Virat came into the crease, so India's chances were dim, you know. So when he stayed longer, so that means India's chances have increased, right? So all the way till the target was set. So of course there's towards the end, players have get to that target, but entry point. So what you need to see is the entry point of Virat, exit point of Virat. Entry and exit, did it make a difference? From 40 for 3 to let's say 100 for 4. So that means he's created that impact. So that is there. So entry and exit. Yeah.
That's actually an interesting way of putting it, because I think that's the most safest way of also judging somebody's contribution. But so I'll play the devil's advocate. What people will say is, if India would have lost that game, because as you mentioned before, that in a limited overs game like a T20 match, the pitch does not change much. That factor is kind of out of play. It is a day game, so there will be no dew factor as well. So South Africans were playing at a much faster rate, but Virat Kohli on the same pitch was kind of struggling. So how do you justify that in terms of impact? Because had India lost that game, people would have definitely, fired shots at Virat Kohli's innings that he is too slow to play the T20 format. In that circumstance, how do you stand for Virat Kohli and say that no, that innings had a much more positive contribution that you might be triggered to believe?
Yes. So I mean, the way to look at it is so imagine in the same collapse, Virat also got out in the same collapse, right? The situation could be, I mean, you are expecting him to score at a faster rate, but what he is trying to do is trying to survive, right? So trying to stay there. So that is his, I mean, you compare it again. So I would always use, are you helping the team win? Are you helping the team lose? So imagine if Virat plays with a rush and he also gets out. That will automatically reduce the team's chances, because there is no other player who plays like Virat, right? So who tends to make a serve. Everyone is more like a high risk, high reward type of place, whether it's Sky or Hardik or down the order as well, right? But Virat is more like a safe player, right? So he tends to stick the probability there, right? So not too much swing in the probabilities, right? So I would definitely love to have Virat type of player where even if I'm not winning, I don't want the percentage to go down. That would be my argument, right? So okay, I'm not going up, that is completely fine, but I don't want to go down as well. Like, what if Virat gets out and everyone gets packed up in 80 all out kind of a situation? I don't want to have that at all, right? But at least I will be in a safe play, have a target to defend. So that would be in a better position compared to 80 for 1, or maybe you are debating about 5-10 runs, and yes, that could make a difference as well. But I believe that for you to win a World Cup, some magical moments have to happen, right? So yeah.
I also agree with this, क्योंकि मैं भी इसी रीजन से डिफेंड करता. ही टुक द सेफ ऑप्शन बेसिकली. अगर वो उसी इंटेंट से चलते रहते तो परहैप्स वो भी आउट हो जाते और इंडिया और भी गंदी सिचुएशन में होती. बट देयर इज दिस वेरी फेमस स्टेटमेंट एंड सारे कमेंटेटर्स इस चीज़ को यूज़ करते हैं. दे से दोज बॉल्स वोंट कम बैक. जो उनने बॉल्स ली, दे वोंट कम बैक. डू यू थिंक ये आर्ग्यूमेंट फेयर है?
आई थिंक कॉन्टेक्स्ट इज taken away when you just give those kind of statements, right? So those balls don't go away. I mean, in what context, right? So if a team it's not at the cost of losing wickets, right? It's not at the cost of losing wickets in a final, per se, right? So I think context, these kind of statements, they don't have any sense in my opinion, because the context is lost, right? So when context is lost, there's no point in making these type of judgments at all.
एक ना हमारे पॉडकास्ट पे एक रिकरिंग थीम है जो कि इनडायरेक्टली आ ही जाता है कहीं ना कहीं से, यहाँ पर ही मुझे लगता है कि वो आ चुका है, क्योंकि एक बहुत ही फेमस इनिंग्स है 2019 वर्ल्ड कप सेमीफाइनल में जब महेंद्र सिंह धोनी बैटिंग कर रहे थे, if you remember, and a lot of people were, and like there is, the whole community is divided into, he was playing fairly and the other half says that no, he was playing too slow. Do you also have any opinion on that?
You won't believe, so that date was 10th July 2019, right? So that day I received an offer letter from cricket.com, so that same day.
Damn.
That was
it's a special date for you.
It's a very special date, right? So I was working in Chennai at that time, right? So I was going in a local train back home, right? So and then I was watching the World Cup on my phone, so and then I suddenly get my offer letter, and then Dhoni gets run out. So it's like a roller coaster of emotions that day.
Okay, so that happened simultaneously.
Yes. Yeah, I still have the offer letter with the date and everything. So yeah, so that was crazy. I think I missed the question. Sorry.
Yeah, like I'm totally with you. I want to celebrate your personal victory as well. But the question was Dhoni playing too slow? If you could have any insights from a data analytics point of view.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was not in this field at that point of time, but as a fan, I mean, definitely felt that it was little slow. Again, he was also playing on a survival mode there. But as we all know, when it comes to last overs, it is all Dhoni's territory, right? Even if the situation was 20 required of 4 balls, Dhoni could have actually done it, right? So maybe he was taking it too deep, making it tougher, but only he understands, right? So no matter what the situation is, see, actually, I was watching an interview of Rahul Dravid, right? So the question was, what if you get a superpower, what do you want to know? So then Dravid's answer was, I want to know what happens in Dhoni's mind in the last overs. Right? So I mean, only he understands, right? So I don't think anybody gets a chance, whether it's slow, whether he's playing for himself, or he's taking it too deep. But I think that's what makes him that kind of a player, that no matter how the situation is, you could argue 100 ways that he's slow, but he will find that one way. If he survived, maybe he can win the match for us, right? So I think on this one, I'm with Dhoni. No matter how end he gets to, even if it is 12 required of 2, we all saw it, right? So previously as well, right? So against Akshar Patel, he did it, right? So 4 sixes in 4 balls, right? So I think he is capable. You have to leave it to player, right? So rather than being judgmental about it, maybe the player could have done it, right? So the situation has gone in our favor. So again, right? So this semi-finals and finals, you need that little magical touch. Otherwise, things don't happen.
I actually appreciate the honesty, because you also mentioned how perhaps from a data point of view, वो शायद थोड़ा slow चल रहा था, but then again, Dhoni is Dhoni. He knows how to finish it. So I think it's a perfect summation of this segment where we discussed how data and instinct can take over a player. The next segment that I want to discuss with you, perhaps the last segment of the podcast, and I want this to be a bit experimental also to a certain extent, because we have not covered this before on the channel and I'm looking to see how people respond to it. We'll talk about AI, but before that, fantasy apps that are the new norm these days. What do you think data can help those who want to indulge in this with exactly? Because if data can predict so much, shouldn't people who actively engage in fantasy apps make a career out of it, be actively using and utilizing data analysts and their insights?
See, I mean, statistically speaking, you should quit fantasy because there's no chance, right? So I was looking at a stat in Dream 11, amongst all the users, 99% of the users have lost money.
Is this worse than the stock market?
Yes, probably yes. 99. So I think if I'm not wrong, maybe 1.2% winners overall, right? So this is considering. So statistically, fantasy is a very bad game to play, but still people choose to play because it's more like a hope game that you are playing. It's more like a IAS, IIT, JEE kind of thing only, right? So hoping that you will also get it, hoping you will also crack it, right? So first take is you have to quit fantasy if you are going statistically, right? So now so you have decided to fantasy no matter what, forget all the data, forget all the money. Now actually in cricket.com, so I did a project called Fantasy Center. It's a 1 year long project. So the logic that I've built, the center that I've built, it is still there. Even after 5 years, it is still there. So that means we've put a lot of effort in building that fantasy center, right? Now, see, for fantasy player, the biggest pain point is the research and the time to create his team is typically 45 minutes. So on an average, so he has to read articles, go through game analysis, who are the players, right? If he's a serious fantasy player. If he's a casual fantasy player, everyone comes in, puts the money, makes a team then and there, right? If you're a serious fantasy player, average time is around 30 to 45 minutes. So what we wanted is we wanted to reduce that 45 minutes to 5 minutes. You can have all the data at one place, because the problem is if let's say CricBuzz, right? So CricBuzz only has stats about career stats, recent matches, that and all. But you will get nothing about fantasy, right? So there is no tool to understand the fantasy metrics. How many times did he come in dream team? How many fantasy points did he get in the last match? Is he a good fantasy? Is he a good cricketer? I have an answer. But is he a good fantasy cricketer? I don't have an answer. Is Virat Kohli a good fantasy pick? I don't have an answer from CricBuzz.
That's very interesting. Could you elaborate on that? That's a very interesting point.
See, for example, let's take Virat only, for example, right? Now, okay, so Virat is usually a safe player again, right? So he's not outrageous, doesn't play at a 200 strike rate. He plays at 120s, sometimes 140s as well. From a fantasy point of view, everyone picks Virat because they're just fans of Virat or they just love Virat, right? But objectively speaking, he is actually not a great fantasy choice at all because he does not give you points.
Very interesting point.
Right? But instead of Virat, maybe I can choose someone like a Rajat Patidar who comes in, smashes 2-3 sixes, and then he gives you the same number of points with just limited balls that he plays. He's a better fantasy pick compared to Virat, right? But then, right, so the thing with people is we are too emotionally connected, fans, favorite players, right? So even if Virat fails for 10 matches, the 11th match, we still play a game of hope. We still pick Virat, right? So that is a mistake that is always done. So yeah.
I think you just summed up BCCI in the past 5 years for test matches.
Yeah, unfortunately that's the problem. Yeah.
So you're saying statistically you should not play fantasy firstly, but if you do, you should not be emotional. So my second question is, firstly, and if possible, if you could back this by a practical example, could be hypothetical as well. Say there's a match between RCB and KKR. I'm supporting KKR. I have to make a team compromising of both the players. Number one, I should not be emotional. I have to basically have impact players in my team who can create a lot of contribution in a short span of time. That would fetch me more points. Is there any way I could have, perhaps with the help of a data analyst or through data in itself that I could gather myself, gauge which player can create more impact rather than just going by the profile that, Virat Kohli is a safe player, Rajat Patidar could create more impact? Is there a scientific way to determine that?
I mean, a simple way to look at it is, let's take a look at last 5 matches. How many fantasy points did the player actually get? Last 5 matches. Instead of looking at runs. So a lot of people look at runs, right? Now, instead of looking at runs, can you take a look at the fantasy points? You can get it on FanCode, you can get it on cricket.com. There are a lot of fantasy applications nowadays, right? So just take a look at how many points were scored in the last recent 3 or recent 5 matches. That is the first point. Second point is how many times did the player actually appear in a dream team. So dream team is one where after every match, so Dream 11 gives you a dream team. That means this was a perfect choice for this was the team. If you have built this team, you could get the maximum points. So that is called a dream team. So how many times did he actually appear in a dream team? So that is another metric, right? And then the third one is you need to keep track of point system, right? So what gives you points? See, ultimately fantasy is all about points, right? So 6 hitters get a lot of points, right? So power play bowlers, they get a lot of points, right? So typically openers, right? So openers, they have the high probability of facing a lot of deliveries. Obviously you want openers in a team, right? People who who bowl death overs. So death overs, you get free wickets, right? Because people are trying to hit. But that is a good thing for points, right? For every wicket you are getting 25, 30 points, right? So I want to pick players who bowl in the death overs. I want to pick bowlers who play in the power play. You get hit a lot. Sometimes you get wickets as well, but most of the times you don't get wickets, right? So openers tend to have the game, right? So, and then for example, for every pitch or for every venue, there are particular players who perform really well. For example, Azaz Patel, he has a very good record in Wankhede, right? So that's how I think he's the highest wicket taker in a single venue in India. 22 wickets in probably 2-3 matches. That's all, right? So every player has some favorite venue, favorite players. You need to keep track of these patterns, right? So some people perform well on birthdays or anniversaries. So for example, I think David Warner and
Rohit Sharma,
they perform well on anniversaries and birthdays. So yeah, I think you need to keep track of these patterns as well.
That's a really interesting one of the shocking insights that we have covered in this podcast. Okay, I have a very tacky question for you. We recently did a couple of podcasts on the match fixing scandals that have happened in the country. The IPL 2013 one, the 2000 India versus South Africa one. Can data also help the authorities predict the probability of a match being fixed also?
So you won't believe this was actually one of my interview questions as well. Right. So so I was giving, so this was probably Uber or something. So when I told them that I come from this background, I worked in cricket and all. So this was one of my interview questions. Can you actually identify these kind of suspected actions on cricket field? Honestly speaking, it's very hard. Right. If you are able to identify, why would players actually do it? Right. So it's not easy. They outplay you, right? So they know how you will identify, right? So of course these things don't happen at that much clarity or that much visibility, right? You don't even have a track of this. One way to think about it is, I think there are some systems that were designed, like for example, let's say you want to identify whether Hardik Pandya was rigged or not, right? So what you do is basically you look at the patterns of Hardik Pandya. When he comes into the crease, what does he do first 6 balls? What does he do next 6 balls? You have a pattern about his gameplay, right? Now you analyze this gameplay for his last 5 matches. And then you see one anomaly that in one game, the first 6 balls he played all dot balls. Then you have a pattern that, okay, so this guy is not playing as per his patterns. There is some outlier, right? So that is one way of detecting the system. But again, the confidence or probability is very, very low. You can't identify at all. It's very hard.
Perhaps it was just a bad day for the player.
You can't. The confidence is not there. For you to say that it's a fraud, you don't have. I think this is the system. Any kind of fraud systems are very hard to crack. Even on all the fantasy apps, there's a lot of money laundering that happens. But you can't identify. It's very, very hard problems. They are very, very hard problems.
Could you expand on this? What money laundering in fantasy apps is exactly?
Yeah, in all real money gamings or where the money is involved, it's fantasy apps or real money gaming, betting. So all these apps, there's some kind of fraud that happens for sure. Right? So there are fraud teams in the companies as well who are focused. Their whole job is to solve these fraudsters, identify these fraudsters. So for example, I'll tell you one type of fraud that happens, right? So let's say I have 1 crore black money. Okay. So what I do is I get 10 people. I hire 10 people, right? And I give 10 lakhs to each of these 10 people. Okay. Now I ask them to play fantasy cricket. Okay. Now what they do is, So these are all, so I gave all the money, that is done. So at the end of this whole chain, so there will be one guy who is at the end of the tunnel. Now all these players will play fantasy only against that player, and then they will lose. So only that player will win. So at the end of all of it, so maybe you will get, after all the cuts, commissions, everything, you get, let's say, 70 lakh rupees. Okay, so my 1 crore of black money is now converted to 70 lakhs of white money. So this is one type of fraud.
Okay, I'll also give you one insight from the research that I conducted. And perhaps if you have anything to say, you can add. So I was listening to an interview of the IPS officer that was involved at that point of time. His name was Neeraj Kumar. And he told the interview, not us, in the interview that nowadays match fixing is not possible because there are just too many factors involved, and to bring together a bunch of players without being caught by some authorities is like, the risk is too high. So now what happens is spot fixing, where you would have, asked a player that the delivery that you will be bowling in the 14th over, say 14.2, that delivery you have to bowl a no ball. Now how do you exactly catch if the bowler did it intentionally or if it was just a mistake? Which you also mentioned that perhaps the player is not having a good day. Because of this, spot fixing is perhaps happening very prevalently in the sport, but it will never be detected by the authorities. That's a very sad reality that we are facing.
Plus, apparently what they do now is they call the player 6 months prior to the game and then tell them कि आपको 6 महीने बाद जो गेम होगा उसके 14th ओवर के सेकंड बॉल पे नो बॉल फेंकनी है.
Correct. I think these kind of situations still happen. Even I heard stories about these kind of people. They come to the hotels that these players are staying, right? So they communicate there, right? So all of this happen. But see, I think most of the new players get into these kind of traps, not the players who are already there in the system, who already know the policies, how to report, right? So all of that. But people who are not aware of these kind of systems, or people who are, especially new players, or people who are playing a game of hope again, right? So maybe it could be of various reasons, but new players nowadays, there are so many state leagues that are happening, right? So actually with every league that is going on, there's so much fraud also that can happen as well, right? So yeah, it's very hard to build a system to identify these kind of regulations. Yeah.
In fact, there was a case study recently. There was one league in Rajasthan, and that whole league was a racket, and they eventually banned it. So this is very prevalent, what you just said. But the last question that I have for the podcast, and this is going to be a thought experiment. As a guy who is so deeply passionate about data, about artificial intelligence, can you paint a very ambitious picture of 2125, 100 years from now? How would AI be affecting the sport, and what changes could we be seeing?
Okay, so yeah, because I was in this field for a long time, I had these kind of crazy thoughts before as well. I'll tell you one of the thoughts. Now,
go as wild as you want.
Definitely. So, for example, let's say there's a child who's 4 years old. Okay. Now, I want him to be exactly like MS Dhoni. I want to play him exactly like him. And so no matter what, I want to create a mimic of MS Dhoni exactly like him. So it's more like I want to create a super cricketer out of a normal human being. Right? Everything, like including the action, decision making, personality, diet. I want to make a replica. So just the faces are different, but the child or the player does exactly mimic, or I want to create the next Sachin Tendulkar. Right? I feed the AI system everything that Sachin has done in his life, including his habits, diet, routines, coaches. Even I want to recreate the coaches that he has trained under. Right? So imagine I have that kind of a crazy system. So whatever I want to become, the player, I want to become Virat Kohli. I want to play exactly cover drive like Virat. Or let's say I want to become a much super cricketer. I want to get cover drive from Virat, helicopter from MS, right? Or the straight drive from Sachin. I want all these ingredients into one player. So just imagine if you have that.
I think this is a concept which is very widely popular, known as designer babies. If I'm not
Yes,
wrong.
that is also there.
A
But I
future
think it's more
potential.
about beauty or the physique aspect of it, not the performance aspect, I guess.
The traits. Okay, so you're saying even that would be replicable
Yes,
going
why
forward.
not? Yeah.
Also, another thing which I think would not take 100 years, it's a very short-lived or or a reality that is approaching very at a very fast pace. Neuralinks that are going to be, widely accessible as per Elon Musk in near future. Don't you think that would impact the sport significantly? Because then, in fact, what you also mentioned, what it implies is that this is going to well and truly become a game of the rich. Those who can afford these technologies will supersede all the other talents, even though they were naturally more gifted. But because you have a technology and the support of AI, you can create babies that are just born to be legends.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Actually, I have two sides of it. So one side is I would definitely want to know what happens inside a cricketer's brain, what happens inside Bumrah's brain. So how does he execute his plans in high tense situations, in whatever situation the match is? I definitely want to know, right? I want to decode his patterns. What goes in his body that creates those kind of results? I definitely want to know. But on the other side, I also don't want to touch it because I think sport is one of the things where everybody would love to watch and enjoy, right? So, I mean, not going too much into, we have very few forms that are left because with AI taking over so many other things, but I want sport to be left alone to, because ultimately it's an art form. It's also an art form where people love to watch, people love to enjoy watching the sport, playing the sport, right? So one side, I definitely want to decode every single aspect of what Bumrah is doing, how his body pulses are moving, how did he develop his action. I want to decode every possible pattern out of his. Now, I'm scared it would definitely come to sport because there's a lot of revolution that is happening. Now currently all visual, like for example, Virat, Siraj, they all wear this Whoop band if you actually watch them closely, right? So now Whoop actually tracks all your sleep metrics, your fitness metrics, your stress levels, right? And then if you have noticed the recent test match, the Jaiswal was wearing a catapult vest.
Which the footballers also
Yes,
wear, if I'm not
generally fast bowlers wear it. But this was the first time I was seeing batsmen also using it, right? So now he's also using it because Jaiswal, if you actually watch that match, he had a back injury because of playing a sweep shot lot of times, right? So people who are more prone to back injuries, stress fractures, actually wear it. So it will tell you that you will face this kind of an injury in certain point, right? It's because you are imposing a lot of stress on your back, something like that.
I think currently जो technology है उससे तो किसी को उतनी प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगी, बट जस्ट थिंकिंग अबाउट द फ्यूचर समटाइम्स इट्स क्वाइट स्केरी. अगर हर कोई सचिन तेंदुलकर जैसा होगा तो व्हाट्स द स्पेशलिटी देन? देखने में मज़ा ही नहीं रहेगा फिर वो.
I was actually about to say, I fully agree firstly that these things are approaching very fast and perhaps they won't even take 100 years. So once we can actually decide who wants to be like Sachin, the only way to keep the sport in the spirit of democracy, to democratize the sport, is to ban people who artificially modify their bodies from entering the sport. But the darker side is, then you would see that there are players or people who can play as well as Sachin Tendulkar on the streets, while in the stadiums, the quality of the game is much lower. So would you really want to watch those games? Do you have any possible solution for this reality? And do you think the organizations at the top level are even imagining about all of these things?
Right. I think there are some startups, like for example, there's a startup called SportWatt. I'm not sure if you have heard about it. So they are actually trying to cover at tier 2, tier 3, 4, 5, even at a village level as well. So they are trying to bring in the broadcasting tech to that level, right? So, so everyone talks about only top level cricket, but given some support to a grassroots level cricket, definitely sure that the talent scouting process, the talent hunting process definitely it's not efficient right now, but I believe given some resources, like maybe 20% of the resources if you can spend on the grassroots level, we will be able to identify talent at a much younger age. Like all the other countries, if you go to China, Australia, they identify talent at a very younger age. But in India, the expectation is you have to crack this level, that level, this level, until you come to, like for example, I am also a chess player, right? For me to prove, I had to prove at my school, I have to prove at my zone, central zone, then district, then state, then south zone, all of that, right? You have to cross all of that levels, right? So there are no proper systems which, like if I was identified, let's say earlier in my journey itself, my trajectory would have been exponentially at a different rate, right? So that kind of systems are not there in our country as of now. So yeah, so I think for us to become that kind of a nation, it takes a lot of effort.
I think the future is very uncertain, and perhaps not planning for it is the only solution. But in a podcast that was based around data and analytics, this one actually stimulated my creativity to another level. So firstly, thank you, David, for joining in. I hope you had a good time.
Yes, I do. It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. So yeah, I had a good time.
I think I really want to expand on the last thought experiment that we did. Perhaps if the audience enjoys it, we should definitely do a podcast just based on that. That would be a super creative, a super entertaining, futuristic podcast. But nonetheless, thank you for now. I think we'll see you very soon.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me.
सो यार आज के लिए बस इतना ही करते हैं. आई थिंक काफ़ी इंटेंस पॉडकास्ट था ये वाला. काफ़ी सारे डेटा इनसाइट्स हमें सीखने को मिले. मेरा फेवरेट सेगमेंट इजीली हैंड्स डाउन लास्ट सेगमेंट था, जहाँ हमने क्रिएटिवली एक थॉट एक्सपेरिमेंट करा कि अगर एआई आज से 100 साल बाद क्रिकेट में एंटर करेगा तो कैसे इस गेम को तुरंत बदल सकता है. व्हाट अबाउट यू?
आई थिंक मेरा फेवरेट सेगमेंट वहाँ था जब हम लोगों ने बीच में विराट कोहली और धोनी की इनिंग्स, जो कि हमारा प्लान नहीं था एक्चुअली में डिस्कस करना, उसको लाके हमने थोड़ा जज करना स्टार्ट करा कि डेटा एनालिटिक्स के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से वाज इट इम्पैक्टफुल या फिर कहीं टीम को डुबा तो नहीं रही थी. वो देखने मजा आया.
आई थिंक ऐसी कई सारी डेटा इनसाइट्स आपको भी पसंद आई होंगी. उनको जरूर कमेंट्स में बताइएगा और आपसे बहुत जल्द मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट पॉडकास्ट के अंदर.